Welcome back, my dearest friends. I can't thank you enough for tuning into my channel. We truly appreciate each and every one of you. We'd absolutely love to know what part of the world you're watching from right now. Please share in the comments. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The call. Tom Walker stood in his kitchen, grimacing at the bitter taste of overcooked coffee. His morning routine had been interrupted by a distracted mind, resulting in the burnt brew before him. At 45, his weathered features told the story of years spent under the sun, commanding construction sites with unwavering authority. His dark hair had a few gray strands at the temples, but his blue eyes still had that sharp focus he'd developed in the military, which helped him deal with challenges. He reached for the newspaper, enjoying the quiet moments before heading to the construction site. His kitchen was simple and well kept, reflecting his practical and systematic approach to life. The salary of a construction foreman was modest, but they were doing okay. He and his wife, Eleanor, and their 21-year-old daughter, Ava, were living a relatively frugal but stable life. But then, out of nowhere, the ring of his phone broke the silence. Tom's hand, which had been holding his coffee mug, suddenly stopped moving. Unknown number. Mr. Walker? A clinical voice came through. This is Memorial Hospital. Your daughter, Ava, has been brought to our emergency department. Tom's fingers tightened around the phone. What happened? We can't talk about the specifics right now, but you should come as soon as you can. I'm on my way. His voice remained steady, but his pulse quickened. Seeing his daughter in such pain, he felt a surge of guilt. He had failed to protect her, and that thought cut deeper than any betrayal. Tom grabbed his jacket, leaving his half-eaten breakfast on the counter. His boots made a thunderous sound as he rushed out of the kitchen. The old pickup truck's engine roared to life, and he pulled out of the driveway with controlled urgency. The hospital's bright lights were a bit overwhelming as he made his way through the emergency department. A kind nurse pointed him toward a curtain bay, and Tom's military training kicked in as he assessed the scene before him. Ava was lying on a bed, her face marked with ugly bruises. Her right eye was swollen, and tears streamed down her cheeks. Her hands trembled as she clutched the thin hospital blanket. "Daddy," she whispered, her voice breaking. Tom moved to stand next to her, taking her hand in his. His touch was gentle, despite the fury building inside him. "I'm here, baby girl. Tell me what happened." Ava's words tumbled out between sobs. "I came home early from Sarah's. I heard some noises upstairs." She squeezed her eyes shut, trying to hold back tears. "In your bedroom." Tom's jaw clenched, but he didn't say anything. "Please go on." "Mom was there, with Uncle Rick." Ava's voice, soft and gentle, dropped to a whisper. "They were together." The words hit Tom like physical blows. Eleanor, his wife of 23 years, with Rick, her brother, the smooth-talking businessman who always seemed to have an angle. "I screamed," Ava continued, her voice quivering. "And then, out of the blue, these two men appeared, Rick's bodyguards. They grabbed me and threw me down the stairs." Her body shook with renewed sobs. "They're still there, Dad. They're over there, drinking your whiskey, laughing." Tom stood up, his movements slow and measured. Have you had a chance to see a doctor yet? They're just waiting for the x-rays. Good. He gently kissed her forehead. I'll be back soon. Dad, Ava said, her voice quivering with concern. Please, don't do anything foolish. Tom's lips curved into a gentle smile. Nothing stupid, love. Just necessary. He found the nurse's station and approached the desk with measured steps. My daughter, Ava Walker. I'd like to know about her injuries. The nurse tapped at her computer. She has some contusions, and it looks like she might have a concussion. We're awaiting x-rays for her ribs and right wrist. The doctor ordered pain medication. I'll make sure all the documentation is in order, Tom offered. Please send me photos of her injuries. Medical reports. Everything. Sir, I'm sorry, but that's not standard procedure. Please, make it happen. His voice took on a softer tone. Those guys aren't getting away with this, are they? The nurse looked closely at his face, then nodded slowly. I'll do my best. Tom's mind raced as he processed the situation. Eleanor, his wife of many years, the woman he'd built a life with, was betraying him with her own brother. Rick, the man who showed up at family dinners with expensive wines and condescending smiles. The man Tom had always sensed was not as pure as he appeared. But bodyguards? This felt like something more significant than a simple infidelity. Rick's business dealings had always seemed a bit fishy to Tom. There was always a bit of money involved, but never enough details. Now, he had bodyguards, men willing to do anything for him. Tom reached out, dialing a number from the past. It's Walker. You remember that favor you owe me from Kandahar? He paused, listening. I'm calling it in. I'd love to know everything you can find on Richard Thorne's business operations. And I mean everything. He ended the call and stared at the emergency room doors. 23 years of marriage. Countless family dinners. Shared holidays. All of it a lie. The betrayal cut deep, but it wasn't the sex that enraged him. It was Ava, his little girl. His child. They had crossed a line that no father could ever let stand. Tom made his way back to Ava's side. She had fallen into a restless sleep, pain medication taking effect. He gazed tenderly at her bruised face, remembering the day she was born. He'd promised then to always protect her from anything that might hurt her. Today, he had failed. But he promised himself he'd do better. A doctor approached, clipboard in hand. Mr. Walker, we need to discuss your daughter's injuries. In a minute, he replied, his voice warm and reassuring. Tom's eyes remained fixed on Ava's face, his concern for her evident. I just need to make one more call. He took a step back from the bed and dialed another number. The line rang twice. Detective Ramirez. This is Thomas Walker. We need to talk about Richard Thorne and his associates. After a moment, the detective listened with a warm, understanding expression. No, not at the station. Somewhere private. This is more serious than you realize. Tom ended the call and returned to Ava's bedside. The doctor waited patiently. Tell me everything, Tom said kindly. I want to know exactly what they did to my little girl. As the doctor described Ava's injuries, Tom's anger shifted into a different kind of emotion, one that was more intense and difficult to understand. Eleanor, Rick, the bodyguards. They thought they were untouchable. They thought they could hurt his family and laugh about it over his whiskey. But they were wrong. They had no idea what kind of man they were dealing with. But they were in for a surprise. Tom was determined to make sure they understood. He settled into the chair beside Ava's bed, his mind already mapping out what needed to be done. First, he'd make sure Ava was safe. Then, he'd gather intelligence. Then they would understand the mistake they'd made. The mistake of betraying Thomas Walker. The mistake of hurting his daughter. The mistake of thinking they could get away with it. Chapter 2. The confrontation. Tom's truck crawled down his street, his trained eyes scanning for unfamiliar vehicles. 2 black SUVs with tinted windows sat in his driveway. They looked like professional muscle, trying to look inconspicuous in a working-class neighborhood. Amateur hour. He parked a block away and approached on foot, his years of military training taking over. The front door was open, letting in light and creating a warm atmosphere on the porch. From inside, music and raucous laughter drifted out. Tom slipped in through the side door, moving quietly through his own home like an intruder. The sound system pumped out bass-heavy music, masking his footsteps. He could smell cigarette smoke, a reminder of the times he'd allowed smoking in his own home. Voices from the living room carried to him. It was a man's laughter, deep and a bit arrogant. It was Rick's voice. "You should have seen his face when I showed up at Christmas dinner. Thanks for the wine, Rick. He's such a clueless guy." More laughter. Eleanor's voice joined in, her words a bit slurred with the warmth of the wine. He never suspected a thing. He was so caught up in his daily routine. Coffee at 6, news at 6:15. Tom's hands curled into fists. After 23 years of marriage, it felt like all that time had been reduced to a joke for her brother's amusement. He stepped into the doorway, and the scene burned itself into his memory. Eleanor was sprawled on the couch, drink in hand, her blouse half unbuttoned. Rick lounged beside her, arm draped possessively around her shoulders. 2 men in black suits stood by the windows, trying to look professional despite the beers in their hands. "Get out," he said, his voice gentle. Tom's voice cut through the music. The room froze in the moment, everyone pausing to take in the moment. Eleanor's drink slipped from her fingers, splashing onto the carpet. Rick's smile faltered. Well, Rick drawled, but his eyes darted to his bodyguards. "The man of the house returns," he said, a playful smile spreading across his face. 5 seconds, Tom said kindly. "Then I'll start removing you." The first bodyguard, a young, fit guy in his suit, stepped forward. "Listen, pal." Tom moved. Years of combat training exploded into violence. His first strike crushed the man's larynx. As the bodyguard clutched at his throat, Tom's knee drove up into his solar plexus. The man crumpled, gasping. The second guard reached for a weapon. Tom caught his arm, twisting until the guard's bones cracked. The guard let out a startled cry. Tom slammed his head into the wall. Once, twice. The man slumped, unconscious. It took just 15 seconds. 2 threats neutralized. Rick stumbled backward, pulling Eleanor with him. "Now, Tom, let's be reasonable." "Reasonable?" Tom advanced on them. Like your men were reasonable with my daughter? She shouldn't have been here. Eleanor blurted out. It's not our fault. Tom gently placed his hand on her shoulder. The sound of the crack reverberated through the room. Eleanor flopped onto the couch, her face all red and puffy, and she was staring at Tom with a look of shock and disbelief. Don't you dare, Tom said, his voice gentle. Don't you dare blame her. Rick tried to edge toward the door. Tom caught him by the throat, slamming him against the wall. Rick's feet dangled, his face reddening. Please, Rick wheezed. We can talk about this. Talk? Tom increased the pressure. Like your men talk to Ava with their fists? He drove his knee into Rick's stomach, then let him fall. As Rick gasped for air, Tom's boot connected with his ribs, once, twice, 3 times. Stop, Eleanor screamed. You'll kill him. No, Tom's voice was calm and measured. Not yet. He gently grabbed Rick's hair, yanking his head up. Your men hurt my little girl. I'll have to return the favor. What followed was a careful, deliberate, and carefully planned action. Tom knew exactly how much damage the human body could take. He made sure to keep Rick conscious so he could feel every blow. When he finished, Rick lay curled on the floor, sobbing. Blood dripped from his nose and lips, pooling on the carpet Tom had installed last summer. Tom turned to Eleanor. She pressed herself against the couch, trembling. Tommy, please, she whimpered. I can explain, he said kindly. Don't call me that. He looked at her like she was a stranger. Please get your things. Please, Tommy. I can explain. If you're still here in 10 minutes, you'll wish you weren't. Eleanor rose unsteadily to her feet. Where should I go? Ask your brother, Tom said, his tone serious. Once he can talk again. He turned to the bodyguards, one unconscious, one still clutching his throat. Take your boss and get out. If I see any of you again, they won't find your bodies. The conscious guard helped his partner up. Together, they lifted Rick, who moaned in pain. This isn't over, Rick mumbled through bloody lips. You're right, Tom smiled warmly, and both guards took an involuntary step back. It's just beginning. He watched them load Rick into one of the SUVs. Eleanor followed them, her cheeks streaked with mascara. She looked back once, but Tom had already turned away. Inside, he surveyed the damage. Broken glass, blood on his carpet, cigarette burns on his coffee table. The home he'd built, now defiled by their presence. His phone buzzed, a text from Mac. Asterisk found something. Meet me tonight. Asterisk Tom nodded to himself. Eleanor and Rick thought this was over. They thought he'd had his revenge, spent his rage. But they were wrong. This wasn't about getting even. This was about justice. For Ava, for all the laughter behind his back, for every holiday dinner where Rick had sat at his table, planning to destroy his family. Tom walked to his bedroom, their bedroom. The bed where she'd betrayed him still bore the evidence of their affair. He carefully stripped the sheets, carried them to the backyard, and set them on fire. Then he made a series of calls to his bank, his lawyer, and Detective Ramirez. Eleanor thought she knew him, thought he was predictable, boring, safe. But she was about to learn how wrong she was. and they were all about to find out how wrong they were. Chapter 3. The backstories in the quiet aftermath of violence. Tom sat in his chair, staring at the blank television screen. The house felt empty and, in a way, tainted. Blood still stained his knuckles, Rick's blood. His phone buzzed again. Asterisk Mac. Construction site. 1 hour. Asterisk Tom closed his eyes, memories flooding back. Afghanistan, 2003. The ambush that almost killed them both. Mac had pulled him to safety, and bullets had torn through the air. The debt between them, written in blood and gunfire. He hadn't always been this man. He had been capable of calculated violence, of cold revenge. He used to be just a small-town kid with simple dreams. His military service had been a formative experience, teaching him about duty, loyalty, and the harsh realities of a world where violence was sometimes necessary to solve problems. He thought back to the day he'd met Eleanor, a memory as warm as the summer sun. She was a waitress at the local diner, always smiling and chatting with customers. He'd just finished his military service and was still getting used to life as a civilian. She was like a beacon of stability in his life, a tangible reality he could hold on to as his mind still rang with the echoes of gunfire and screams. Their relationship had been a whirlwind of love and connection. She talked about her dreams, a big house, fancy cars, the kind of life her brother Rick enjoyed. Tom promised to give her everything he could, not riches, but stability, security, and a home. For a long time, it had been just what they needed. They had Ava, and together they built a life. Tom had worked hard and risen from laborer to foreman, taking pride in his honest work. Eleanor seemed happy, or at least he thought she was. But now, he was starting to wonder how long the lies had been going on. How long had she looked at his rough hands and worn work boots with a hint of disdain? Had she been conspiring with Rick, amused by the loyal husband who trusted her? Rick. Tom's hands clenched at the thought of his brother-in-law, the golden boy of the family, with his designer suits and smooth talk. Tom had never quite trusted him, had always seen the predator beneath the polished exterior. But for Eleanor's sake, he'd welcomed Rick into his home, broken bread with him, endured his subtle jabs and condescending smiles. Then, Tom's phone rang. It was Detective Ramirez. "Walker," he answered. "I've got some info on your brother-in-law," Ramirez said, skipping right to the point. "I'm afraid it's not going to be what you're hoping for. Tell me, those weren't just bodyguards at your house. They're enforcers. It seems like Rick has been running a protection racket, squeezing local businesses. He's got cops on the payroll, judges in his pocket." Tom took this in, his heart racing with concern. That explains the muscle. "There's more to it," Ramirez continued. "Your wife's been making some pretty significant withdrawals. She's been moving money into offshore accounts. How long has this been going on?" "She's been doing it for at least 6 months. Walker." Ramirez paused, seeming to consider his words carefully. "They were planning to clean you out. They even had divorce papers ready to go. They were going to take everything, leave you with nothing but debt." Tom's laugh was a bit unkind. "Thank you so much for letting me know, Detective Walker." Ramirez's voice took on a serious tone. "Please, Don't do anything rash. Rick's got connections. He's dangerous. So am I. Tom ended the call. He stood up and started moving through the house with purpose. In the bedroom, he opened the closet and gently pushed aside some of the hanging clothes. Behind a false panel, he found his own secret hiding spot, a safe that remained unknown to Eleanor. Inside, he found mementos of his military life, documents, medals, and a book of contacts from his service days. These men had been his friends and colleagues during his military service. These men knew how to handle problems quietly. The construction site was dim when he arrived. Mac's truck was parked in the shadows, away from the street lights. Tom approached with care, keeping an eye out for anything unusual. He was still the same old guy. After all, Mac stood by a stack of steel beams, his broad frame silhouetted against the night sky. Even after 20 years as a civilian, he hadn't lost his edge. He still moved like a soldier, alert and ready. "You look like hell," Mac said as Tom approached. "You should see the other guy." Mac nodded toward his truck. "I've got something to show you." Inside the truck's cab, Mac pulled out a laptop. "I've been doing some digging on Rick's operations. This guy's involved in all sorts of things: real estate fraud, protection rackets, money laundering. But here's where it gets really interesting." He turned the screen toward Tom, showing bank statements, property records, and shell companies. "Your wife's name keeps coming up. She's been working with Rick for years, helping him move money around. She's not just his lover. She's his partner." Tom looked closely at the documents, his expression showing concern. "She played me for a fool." "There's more to this," Mac continued, his voice warm with concern. "Rick's got problems. He's in over his head with some shady characters. I've heard he's in a bit of a pickle. That might be why they decided to move forward with their plan with you a little faster than expected." Timeline? Mac pulled up more documents. "They've been planning this for months. The divorce, the asset transfers, they've got it all planned out. They were going to take advantage of you, make you pay Rick's debts. You'd have lost everything. Your house, your savings, maybe even ended up in jail for their financial schemes." Tom listened, absorbing this information in silence. The betrayal went deeper than he'd ever imagined. It wasn't just an affair. It was a deliberate plan to destroy him. "What about Ava?" he asked, his voice tinged with concern. "She wasn't supposed to be home today. They made a mistake, and now they're caught." Rick's guys panicked. Tom's jaw clenched. "They hurt my little girl, and they'll be held accountable for their actions," Mac assured him. "But you need to be smart about this. Rick's got connections. If you go after him directly, you might end up dead or in prison." "I'm not going to kill him," Tom said quietly. "Death's too quick, too clean. I want them to suffer. I want them to lose everything, just like they planned for me." Mac studied his old friend's face. "You've got a plan? You're almost there." Tom stood. "I need you to keep digging. Bank records, business dealings, you name it. I want to know every skeleton in their closet." "What about Eleanor?" Tom's expression showed concern. "She made her choice. Now she lives with it." He left Mac and drove home, his mind working through possibilities. The house felt different now, like a crime scene, not a home. He walked through each room, noting the small signs he'd missed. The extra phone she'd hidden in her jewelry box, the financial documents tucked behind the filing cabinet, the business cards from offshore banks. It was as if all the pieces of their betrayal were hidden in plain sight. He paused in Ava's room, thinking about the past. Her walls were covered with photos of family vacations, birthdays, graduations. Eleanor smiling, playing the devoted mother, while plotting to destroy their lives. His phone buzzed, a text from Ava. "When can you pick me up?" Tom texted back. Asterisk tomorrow morning. Get some rest. Asterisk another text came in. This one from Eleanor. We need to talk. Tom deleted it without responding. There was nothing left to say. He spent the night in his chair, cleaning his gun, making lists, planning. Eleanor and Rick thought they knew him. The predictable, reliable Thomas Walker, the man who played by the rules. But they had no idea what he was truly capable of. As the sun came up, Tom made his coffee, taking his time to make sure it was just right. He had experienced betrayal before, in war, and he understood the effect it had on people. But this was different. This wasn't a war. This was about family. They brought war to his home, threatened his child. Now, he was determined to show them what that meant. The sun rose over his home, which was now broken, marking the end of one life and the beginning of another. Thomas Walker, a devoted husband, a loving father, and a hard-working builder of homes, had gone. In his place stood a warrior, awakened from a long slumber, a man with nothing left to lose and everything to avenge. The war had begun. Chapter 4. The hospital visit. Tom walked briskly through the clean hospital corridors toward Ava's room, his boots making a soft, echoing sound against the linoleum. The nurse at the station gave him a nod. They'd grown used to his presence over the past day. Through the door's window, he could see Ava lying in bed, her bruised face turned toward the TV mounted on the wall. "Hey, sweetheart," he said gently, stepping into the room. Ava's eyes lit up, despite her injuries. "Dad," she said, her voice warm and reassuring. Her voice was stronger than before, but pain still edged her words. Tom settled into the chair beside her bed, taking her hand in his. The bruises on her face had darkened, showing how much time had passed since Rick's men had attacked her. Tom's jaw tightened at the sight. "The doctor says I can go home tomorrow," Ava said. "Not home," Tom replied gently. "I've arranged for you to stay with Sarah for a while." "But, Dad—" "No worries, sweetie," he replied, his voice warm and reassuring. His voice was gentle but firm. "Home isn't safe right now. I need to handle something, but I'll be back soon." Ava felt her fingers tighten around his. "Mom called me," he added. Tom's expression showed concern. "What did she say?" "She tried to explain. Said it wasn't what I thought. She said that it wasn't what I thought, and that Uncle Rick—" Ava's voice quivered with emotion. "She said I shouldn't have been there. She said it was my fault for coming home early." Tom stood up quickly, trying to stay calm. "Nothing about this is your fault. Nothing. I should have known something was wrong," Ava continued, her voice quivering slightly. "The way they'd whisper when you weren't around, and how Uncle Rick started showing up more often when you were at work." She wiped at her eyes. "Mom's been meeting with lawyers. I saw the paperwork in her car last week. I should have told you. You trusted your mother. That doesn't make you a bad person. Tom returned to her bedside. Tell me everything you remember. When did Rick start coming around more? As Ava spoke, Tom's mind cataloged details, building a timeline of betrayal. Eleanor's real estate meetings that ran late. Rick's spontaneous drop-ins, which always coincided with Tom's presence at the construction site. The discreet phone conversations. The hidden documents. A knock at the door interrupted them. Max stood in the doorway, his hospital administrator badge glinting under the fluorescent lights. Can I get a minute? Mac asked. Tom squeezed Ava's hand. Get some rest. I'll be back soon. In the hallway, Mac pulled him aside. Those guys you roughed up, they're not just muscle for hire. They're tied to some pretty shady characters. One of them worked security for a casino downtown, and he's got a lot of mob ties. The other one has quite the rap sheet, too. Assault, extortion, attempted murder. Tom took it all in. Rick's got more going on than I thought. And that's not all. Ma glanced around before continuing. I've been asking around about your brother-in-law. He's got some pretty influential people on his side, like cops and judges. Someone's making sure he stays out of trouble. Do you think you could get me some names? Mac nodded. I'm working on it. Just be careful, okay? These guys aren't just any old amateurs. Suddenly, Tom's phone buzzed. Detective Ramirez was requesting a meeting. Keep digging, he told Mac. I need everything you can find. Back in Ava's room, he found her dozing. The medication made her sleep more, which was probably for the best. She didn't need to see what was coming. A kind nurse came in with fresh bandages. Mr. Walker, we need to document her injuries again for the police report. Tom watched as the nurse carefully photographed each bruise, each scrape, ensuring that every piece of evidence was documented. His daughter's discomfort, captured in digital images. The detective working her case called. The nurse said, "They're interested in speaking with her tomorrow." No. Tom's voice was firm. She's been through so much. They can talk to me. The nurse looked a bit unsure. Sir, in cases of domestic violence, hey, I get it. This isn't domestic violence, Tom reassured her. This is something else entirely. I'm handling it. Later, as night fell over the hospital, Tom sat watching Ava sleep. His phone lit up with texts from Eleanor. Please, explanations, and threats. He deleted them all. The woman he'd married, the mother of his child, was gone. In her place was a stranger who'd conspired to destroy him, who'd watched their daughter being attacked and done nothing. Tom's fingers gently traced the military ID he still carried in his wallet. 20 years ago, he had been a man, a soldier, who knew how to deal with enemies, who understood that sometimes violence was the only language people respected. He buried that part of himself when he came home, built a life of peace. But now, as he looked at his daughter's bruised face, he felt that soldier stirring, rising, ready for war. Eleanor, Rick, they're thugs. They brought violence into his home, hurt his child, tried to take everything. But they were about to find out that Thomas Walker hadn't forgotten how to fight. Chapter 5. The police station was bustling with activity as Tom made his way to Detective Ramirez's desk. Isabella Izzy Ramirez was a sharp-featured woman in her 40s, with keen eyes that missed nothing. She motioned him to sit. "You look like hell," she said kindly. "You've had a tough few days, haven't you?" Izzy pulled out a thick file. "I've got some information you'll really need to see. Your wife's been busy." She spread photos across her desk, showing surveillance shots of Eleanor meeting with various men in expensive suits. "That's Julian Torres." Izzy pointed to a handsome man in his 30s. "He's a bit of a con artist. He's really good at real estate fraud. We've had our eye on him for a while, but so far, nothing's come of it. Your wife has had at least 6 meetings with him in the past month." Tom looked closely at the photos. "What's the connection?" "Torres helps people hide money, sets up shell companies, offshore accounts. He's really good at what he does. We haven't been able to prove anything, though." Izzy leaned forward, eager to understand. 3 weeks ago, Eleanor transferred most of your joint savings into an account we can't trace. The paperwork looked legitimate. Your signature was on everything. "I never signed anything like that." "No, but someone did. Someone good enough to fool the bank." Izzy pulled out more documents. "There's more. Your brother-in-law's businesses are actually fronts. Money laundering, probably drugs. And those bodyguards who hurt your daughter? They work for the Castellano family." The name hit Tom like a physical blow. The Castellanos controlled most of the city's organized crime. If Rick was involved with them, "You need to back off," Izzy warned. "These people don't play games. They'll kill you and never think twice." Tom's laugh was a bit harsh. "They already tried to destroy me. They hurt my daughter. Do you expect me to just walk away? I'm just saying, be smart about it." Izzy's voice took on a softer tone. "Look, I can't officially help you, but unofficially." She slid a USB drive across the desk. "This has everything we have on Torres, Rick, and their operations, account numbers, business records, surveillance reports. Just be careful how you use it." Tom took the drive, his eyes bright with gratitude. "I'm so grateful, Tom. You're absolutely right." And Tom, she gently took his arm as he stood. "Whatever you're planning, I hope it doesn't include getting me in trouble." Tom drove from the police station to his bank. The manager looked sympathetic as she reviewed his accounts. "I'm sorry, Mr. Walker. The transfers were all properly authorized. Your wife had power of attorney. Please show me everything she moved, where it went." The manager pulled up the transaction records. Tom's jaw clenched as he saw their savings disappear. College funds, retirement accounts, all gone. Eleanor had been so thorough. His phone buzzed with a notification from Mac, sending over the meeting's location. Tom found Mac in the hospital parking garage, smoking despite the rules. "Got those names you wanted," Mac said. "Judge Michael Preston's been handling all cases involving Rick's businesses, dismissing charges, sealing records. The Castellanos have a strong hold on him." "What about the bodyguards?" "Vincent Caruso and Tony Baglia. They're career criminals. Caruso is still in the ICU, but he'll be okay. Baglia was released this morning." Tom nodded. "Where does he live?" Mac's eyes narrowed. "Why?" "I just need to ask him a few things." These guys are pros, Tom. They're not people you want to mess with. They can try. Tom's tone was measured. You going to tell me where he lives, or not? Mac let out a sigh, handing over a piece of paper. Your funeral. Tom's next stop was his house. Eleanor had gathered most of her belongings, but he wasn't interested in clothes or jewelry. He went straight to her home office, the one place she never let him organize. The filing cabinets held a wealth of information: bank statements, correspondence, meeting records. Eleanor had documented everything, probably to protect herself, but now her own paranoia was going to destroy her. Among her things, there was a hidden folder with photos of Eleanor and Rick in some intimate situations. Tom realized that this could be used to blackmail her. She'd been playing everyone, even her partner in crime. Then, his phone rang. It was Eleanor. He almost deleted it, but then he thought better of it. It was time to start playing his own game. Yes? Tommy, please. Her voice was a little teary. We need to talk. This isn't what you think, honey. No? His voice was warm and friendly. So you didn't steal my money? Didn't you see when Rick's men threw our daughter down the stairs? I didn't know they would hurt her. Rick promised. Rick promised what? That he'd help you bleed me dry? Set me up for his crimes? There's a brief pause. Then, how did you know about? I know everything, Eleanor. About Julian Torres. About the Castellanos. About Judge Preston. She let that sink in. You really should have been more careful with your paperwork. Tom, please, she said, her voice tinged with concern. You don't understand what you're dealing with. These people, no, you don't understand. You brought these people into my home. Let them hurt my child. Now, you're watching while I tear their whole world down. They'll kill you. Even better men than them have tried. Tom ended the call. His laptop booted up, and he inserted Izzy's USB drive. Hours of surveillance footage, financial records, police reports. Everything he needed to understand his enemy's operations. A separate file contained information on Julian Torres' past victims, people he'd conned, lives he destroyed. Tom began making notes. These people would want revenge. They just needed someone to show them how to get it. As night fell, Tom cleaned his gun, an old habit that helped him think. Eleanor and Rick thought they were dealing with a simple construction foreman, a predictable man who played by the rules. But they had forgotten, or never knew, what he'd been like before. The things he'd done in service to his country. The skills he'd acquired and never quite let go of. Tom smiled in the darkness. It was time to remind them. Chapter 6. The Plan. The bar was nearly empty when Tom arrived. Mac was sitting in a corner booth, spread out with files on the table, and a half-empty whiskey in front of him. Even after 20 years of working in hospital administration, Mac hadn't lost any of his military bearing. You mean the hospital reports? Tom asked, sliding into the booth. Mac pushed them over. Caruso got 3 broken ribs, fractured larynx, possible permanent damage to his knee. But Baglio wasn't much better. Broken jaw, dislocated shoulder, concussion. They'll live. Yeah. Mac looked at his friend's face with concern. You starting a war here, Tom? They started it. I'm just putting the finishing touches on it. Mac pulled out more papers. I've got the background checks you wanted. Torres has been working with Rick for about 2 years. They've got a pretty sophisticated operation going on. They find people who are in desperate situations, offer them fake investment opportunities, and then take advantage of them. Your wife was instrumental in setting up the companies and handling the paperwork. How many people have been affected? At least 20 that we know of. Most of them lost everything. Mac passed me a list of names and addresses. What are you planning to do? Tom took the list into his pocket. It's probably better if you don't know. These people you're dealing with, they're not amateurs. The Castellanos are serious business. Neither do I. Tom's tone was calm and measured. Not anymore. His phone buzzed. Detective Ramirez, requesting another meeting. Be careful, Ma said, her voice full of concern. Always do. Tom found Izzy in the police station parking lot, leaning against her car. Got something you need to see, she said, handing him a file. Judge Preston's been making regular deposits to an offshore account, and these are pretty sizable, too. Those are way beyond what his salary could explain. Tom looked over the bank statements. This is what they used to buy him. Looks like. But that's not all. Izzy pulled out more photos. Preston's got a weakness for young prostitutes. Rick's people have been providing them, along with cocaine. They've got him wrapped around their little finger. Useful information. Izzy gently took his hand. Please, don't do anything foolish. These people have protection, money, power. Tom's smile was a bit distant. But they've never dealt with someone like me. Back home, Tom spread everything across his dining room table. Surveillance photos, financial records, witness statements. It was like the pieces of a puzzle were finally coming together. Rick's operation was bigger than he'd imagined. Real estate fraud was just the surface. Beneath that, there were more layers. Money laundering, drug trafficking, prostitution, all shielded by officials who were corrupt and mob connections. Eleanor must have known, but, for whatever reason, she chose to team up with them, helping them destroy him. His phone lit up with a text from an unknown number. Asterisk back off while you can. Last warning. Tom saved the number. It was comforting to know that they were worried enough to threaten him. He started taking notes, carefully mapping out the connections and vulnerabilities. Rick's operation was all about keeping victims confidential and keeping up the appearance of being legitimate. But what would happen if that facade cracked? Judge Preston was the weak link. If we could just take him down, the whole protection scheme would crumble. But first, Tom pulled out the list Mac had given him, Torres victims. People who'd lost their homes, savings, and businesses. People with nothing left to lose. It was time to give them a chance at revenge. His laptop had templates for business letters and corporate documents. Within hours, he'd crafted invitations to a private investment recovery meeting and anonymous tips about where their money had really gone. It was like the seeds of destruction had already started to sprout. Then, he accessed the surveillance footage Izzy had provided. There, he saw Judge Preston leaving a brothel. He saw Preston meeting with known drug dealers. Preston accepting envelopes of cash from Rick's associates. He made 3 copies of the footage, saving them to separate drives. One for the media, one for the bar association, and one for Preston himself. Tom's phone buzzed again. It was Ava. Dad, when can I come home? Not yet. baby. Soon, though. He kept his voice gentle. How are you feeling? Better. Sarah's parents have been really nice. A pause. Mom keeps calling. Don't answer. I wasn't planning on it. Ava's tone softened, but her voice still held a hint of firmness. I saw what they did to you, what they tried to take from us. None of that matters. You're my world. Just be careful, okay? I can't lose you, too. I promise I won't. Tom felt a surge of determination. Go lay down for a bit. I love you. After hanging up, Tom returned to his planning. The pieces were in place. Judge Preston's corruption, Torres victims, the Castano criminal empire. It was all connected, all vulnerable. If he could just pull the right threads, the whole thing would unravel. His phone lit up again, and it was Eleanor. This time, he answered. Last chance, he said, his voice gentle but firm. Tell me where the money is, he said kindly. I can't, she said, her voice quivering. They'll kill me. I really hope they catch you before I do, he said, his voice warm with concern. He ended the call and went back to work. The soldier in him understood that this wasn't about revenge, but just the way war can be. Intelligence gathering, assessment of the target, strategic strikes. Eleanor, Rick, Torres, the Castanos. They were about to learn what happened when you pushed a trained killer too far. When you hurt his family. Tom smiled in the darkness. The storm was gathering. It was time to let it break. Chapter 7. The trapped Tom sat in his truck outside Julian Torres' office building, watching through binoculars as the con man's victims arrived one by one. 20 people whose lives Torres had destroyed, each carrying manila folders filled with evidence of his schemes. Tom had reached out to all of them, given them the chance to get even with Torres, and showed them the proof of his fraud. His phone buzzed with a text from Izzy. Asterisk Judge Preston, just sign the warrants. Move when ready. Asterisk Tom checked his watch. In 30 minutes, Preston would realize his error, signing search warrants for properties owned by his Castellano family benefactors. By then, it would be too late. Inside the building's lobby, the victims gathered, and their anger was clear. One of them was a banker who had lost his pension, a widow whose house had been stolen through forged documents, a contractor who had fallen victim to some shady business practices. They were all waiting for Torres to arrive. Tom's burner phone rang. It was Danny Lee. The transfers are done, Danny said. Rick's accounts are empty. Everything's been transferred to the shell companies. What about the offshore accounts? Those two. Eleanor's nest egg is unfortunately gone. They're both a bit short on cash at the moment. Tom nodded, understanding the situation. Please send the evidence to the IRS. Anonymous tip. I've already sent it. You sure about this? The Castellanos will be fine. Don't worry about them. I'll take care of it. Tom ended the call. A sleek black Mercedes pulled into the parking lot, and it was Torres, ready to start his day. Tom watched through the binoculars as the con man stepped out, straightening his expensive suit. Torres hadn't noticed the gathering crowd yet, too busy checking his reflection in the car window. Tom took out his phone and dialed the number he'd gotten from Mac. Mr. Torres, this is David Shunn from the SEC. We've received some reports about your investment practices, and we'd like to discuss them with you. I'm in your lobby with some former clients who'd like to discuss the matter. Torres froze, then turned toward the building entrance. Tom could see the moment he recognized the faces waiting for him. The con man's confident mask slipped, revealing a raw fear. Tom smiled warmly and dialed another number, the local news station. This is an anonymous tip. You might want to send a crew to 1835 Market Street. A group of fraud victims are confronting the man who stole their life savings. Torres tried to make a run for it, but the crowd had already spotted him. They surged forward, waving documents, shouting accusations. A news van screeched into the parking lot, cameras rolling. Tom's phone lit up with a call from Rick. He let it go to voicemail, then checked the message. You bastard. What did you do? The IRS is here. They're seizing everything. I'm so angry. I'll kill you for this. Another call, Eleanor this time. Her voice shook with pain and panic. Tom, please. They're saying it was all a fraud, that Rick was laundering money. They're freezing my accounts. I really need your help. Tom deleted the message without responding. Tom looked through the binoculars and saw Torres pushing through the crowd. His designer suit was wrinkled and torn. The camera crew captured the heartbreaking stories of the victims as they shared their experiences of being cheated for decades. Police cars arrived, lights flashing. Tom recognized Izzy stepping out of an unmarked vehicle, warrant in hand. She had timed it perfectly. Torres caught on camera, surrounded by his victims, as federal agents moved in to arrest him. Tom's burner phone buzzed with a text from Danny. Asterisk files sent to the SEC. Torres' entire operation was exposed. Rick's connection to the fraud was documented. They'll both be taken down for this. The plan was working like a charm. Torres would talk to save himself, implicating Rick in the fraud. Rick would panic, probably trying to run. The Castellanos would realize he'd become a liability. Tom started his truck and pulled away, leaving a trail of chaos in his wake. One target down, 2 more to go. His next stop was the construction site, where he'd arranged to meet Baglia, the bodyguard who'd helped throw Ava down the stairs. The man had agreed to talk, thinking Tom wanted to negotiate peace. Tom parked behind the half-finished building, checking his recording equipment. Everything Baglia said would be captured, documented, and preserved as evidence against Rick and his criminal associates. The bodyguard arrived right on time, alone as instructed. His face still showed bruises from their last encounter. Let's keep this brief, Baglia said in a friendly tone. I shouldn't be here. Tom emerged from the shadows, a gentle presence. Tell me about Rick's operation. The money laundering. The protection rackets. Tell me everything. You're out of your mind. I'm not saying anything. Tom pulled out his phone, played a recording of Ava discussing drug shipments, naming names, detailing criminal operations. The bodyguard's face went pale. How'd you get this? Your partner, Caruso, talks in his sleep. And, wouldn't you know it, hospital rooms have surprisingly thin walls. Tom's voice took on a serious tone. Please, just tell me what happened, and I promise not to go to the authorities about this, especially not the Castellanos. Baglia talked for an hour. He talked about the crimes Rick had committed, his ties to the mafia, and the elaborate web of corruption he had created. Tom took notes as he listened. When Baglia finished, Tom handed him an envelope with a plane ticket to Miami and some cash for a fresh start. You can go away and start over, or we can share the recording. The bodyguard, visibly rattled, accepted the envelope and quickly left. Tom sent copies of the recording to multiple secure locations, just in case. His phone buzzed with a message from Mac, sharing the location. It was time for the next step. Rick would be panicking now, watching his empire crumble. Eleanor would be desperate. Her stolen money vanished into untraceable accounts. Both of them were running scared, making mistakes. Tom smiled in the darkness. The trap was sprung. Now came the fun part, watching them try to escape, even though it would be so hard for them. Chapter 8. The confrontation. The warehouse district was deserted at this hour, silent except for the distant rumble of freight trains. Tom parked his truck behind an abandoned loading dock and checked his weapons. The Glock was clean and loaded. The backup piece strapped to his ankle. He didn't plan on needing them, but it was good to have. His phone lit up with texts. Asterisk Danny. Rick just tried accessing the accounts. They're all empty. He's totally freaking out. Asterisk Mac. Castellano enforcers spotted at Rick's office. They don't look happy. Izzy. Preston's singing like a bird. He's naming names, dates, everything. The whole operation's exposed. Asterisk Tom deleted the messages and stepped out into the night. The warehouse ahead had been Rick's primary money laundering front, a wholesale electronics business that never seemed to ship any actual products. Now, it would become the stage for Rick's downfall. The security cameras had been disabled, thanks to Danny's hacking skills. Tom moved carefully through the shadows, taking deep breaths as he waited for the right moment. Right on schedule, a black SUV pulled up to the loading dock. Rick stumbled out, clutching a briefcase. His expensive suit was rumpled, and his face was pale with fear. Two Castellano soldiers stood nearby, looking serious. "The money's here," Rick said, his voice cracking with emotion. "All of it. Just give me a moment to explain." The larger soldier took the briefcase and checked inside. "It's empty," he said, a hint of disappointment in his voice. "No, that's impossible." Rick's eyes darted around, looking concerned. "It was just here. Someone must have. You lost 10 million of the family's money," the second soldier said, sounding worried. "Mr. Castellano wants answers." Tom appeared, seeing Rick's distressed expression. "Looking for this?" He held up a USB drive. "Bank records. Transfer histories. Evidence of where all that money really went." "You." Rick lunged forward, but the soldiers held him back. "This is all your fault." "No, Rick. This is your fault. You got greedy. You got a little sloppy, didn't you?" Tom's voice was warm and friendly. "Did you really think you could steal from the mob and get away with it?" "I didn't steal anything. It was business." "Really?" Tom turned to the soldiers. "Could you check his offshore accounts? The ones he thought were secret? He's been doing this for years, playing both sides." The larger soldier's phone buzzed. He checked it, then nodded to his partner. "Hey, boss says it's true. We found the accounts." Rick's face went ghost white. "No, wait. I can explain." "The boss doesn't want explanations." The soldier reached for his weapon. He wants his money. I'll get it back. I just need time. Time's up, Rick. Tom's smile faltered. The feds are closing in. The judge is talking. Your whole operation's exposed. The Castellanos can't risk keeping you alive. Please. Rick turned to the soldiers. I've got information on everyone, names, dates, recordings. Is that supposed to make us trust you more? The soldier's gun appeared. Tom discreetly stepped back into the shadows. Goodbye, Rick. Say hello to your friends in hell. Rick's screams echoed through the warehouse. 2 shots, muffled by suppressors. Then, suddenly, there was only silence. Tom waited until the SUV pulled away, then made an anonymous call to the police. They'd probably find Rick's body and think it was a mob hit. Case closed. His phone buzzed. Eleanor was calling again. This time, he answered. It's over, he said, his voice gentle. Rick's dead. Torres is in custody. The money's gone. Tom, please, she said, her voice cracking with emotion. I never meant for any of this, he said, his voice soft. I'm sorry, but you're just lying to yourself if you think that. I'm done listening. What am I supposed to do? I have nothing left. You've got exactly what you deserve. Tom's tone was cold. You chose this path. Now you're on your own. He ended the call and drove to the motel where Eleanor was hiding. When she opened the door, he could see that she had been crying. She was wearing cheap apartment store clothes instead of her usual designer ones, and her makeup was smeared. Come to gloat, she asked, her voice laced with anger. Come to deliver your divorce papers. And this. He handed her an envelope containing proof of her involvement in Rick's crimes. You can try anything you want, but this is going to the feds. You can't prove anything. Want to bet? Tom's smile was a bit unnerving. I've got recordings, bank records, witness statements, everything. Eleanor looked a little sad. What do you need, sweetie? Please sign the papers. I'll just disappear. Please, just don't contact me or Ava ever again. And if I don't? Well, if you don't, I'll have to do my best to make sure you're completely destroyed. It's your call. She signed. Tom left her there, sobbing in her cheap motel room, her dreams of wealth and power shattered. His phone buzzed with the thought of Izzy calling with updates. The investigation was going as smoothly as could be. Rick's death would be ruled a mob hit. Torres was cooperating, implicating everyone. The Castellanos were turning on each other, their empire crumbling. Tom felt a sense of satisfaction as he drove home. They tried to destroy him, hurt his daughter, and steal everything he'd built. Instead, he had managed to overcome them completely. Chapter 9. The aftermath. The sunlight streamed through the kitchen window as Tom made coffee. This time, he made sure it was properly brewed. The morning paper's headlines screamed, "Major crime ring exposed." Below that, "Prominent businessman found dead in warehouse." His phone buzzed. Mac checking in. "It's all over the news," Mac said. "Rick's murder. Torres arrest. The whole operation exposed. You sure about this?" "It's all done." Tom sipped his coffee. "The Castellanos think Rick stole their money. The feds think it was a mob hit. It's all wrapped up." "And Eleanor?" Broke. She's on her own. She's running scared. She signed the papers this morning. Good. Mac paused, his face a picture of concern. Avi okay? She's doing better. She's coming home today. After hanging up, Tom reviewed the morning's reports. Danny had erased all traces of their cyber operations. Izzy had sealed the case files, marking Rick's murder as solved, organized crime. The Castellanos were preoccupied with federal investigations, so they weren't thinking about getting revenge. His doorbell rang, and it was Ava, returning from Sarah's house. She looked better. Her bruises were fading, and her smile was genuine. "Hey, Dad," she said, her voice warm and comforting. Tom gave her a gentle hug. "Welcome home, baby girl." "I saw the news," she said, her voice soft as she studied his face. "Did you? It's better if you don't ask questions you don't want answered." Ava nodded her head in agreement. "Mom called me." "What did she say?" "She asked me to help her. She said she was sorry. She said she had nowhere to go." Ava's voice took on a serious tone. "I told her she should have thought about that before betraying us." Tom felt a surge of pride. His daughter was as strong as he was. She didn't like betrayal, and he understood that. Suddenly, his phone buzzed. It was Detective Ramirez. "I just wanted you to know," Izzy said. "Torres turned on everyone. Judge Preston is going away for decades. The whole corruption ring is exposed. Thank you so much for the update." "Tom," she said, her voice taking on a gentler tone, "it's all over. Let's just let bygones be bygones." He ended the call and joined Ava in the kitchen. She was making breakfast, humming softly. "What now?" she asked, her voice full of concern. "Now," Tom said, "we rebuild. Together." Later, in his study, Tom reviewed the final pieces of his revenge, the offshore accounts where he'd hidden Rick's stolen millions, insurance against future threats. He also had the files documenting Eleanor's crimes, ready to destroy her if she ever returned. He had a network of allies, Mac, Danny, and Izzy. They were his trusted friends, and they understood the importance of justice. Then, his phone buzzed one last time. He hadn't seen the number before. He answered carefully. Mr. Walker, a cultured voice, probably Castellano himself. "I want to thank you for exposing Rick's theft. The family is very grateful for your discretion. I just wanted justice." "Absolutely. You're more than welcome to count on our protection. No one will bother you or your daughter ever again." Tom smiled warmly. "I really appreciate that." He ended the call and deleted the number. Everything had gone smoothly. His enemies were destroyed. His daughter was safe. His future was looking bright. The soldier in him knew it was a complete victory. Then, the doorbell rang, and it was Mac, Danny, and Izzy, ready to join him for dinner. They were his new family, forged in battle and tempered by loyalty. Tom joined them, accepting their congratulations, their concern, their friendship. He was no longer the naive man who trusted too easily. He'd become something harder, colder, more dangerous. But watching Ava laugh with their friends, seeing her heal from the betrayal, he knew it had been worth it. He protected what mattered most. He had destroyed those who threatened his family. The war was over. He'd won. And God help anyone who ever tried to hurt them again. Epilogue. 5 years later, the construction company's new headquarters stood proudly against the city skyline. Walker and Associates Construction displayed in bold letters across the glass facade. Inside his top-floor office, Thomas Walker reviewed the quarterly reports with the same intensity he once used to plan military operations. At 50, his hair had more gray than dark now, but his blue eyes still had that same piercing focus, and his body remained ready for anything through his hard work and dedication. The intercom buzzed. "Mr. Walker, your daughter's here." "Send her in," he replied warmly. Ava strode into the office, now 26 and carrying herself with confident grace. Her law degree hung on Tom's office wall, paid for with Rick's stolen millions, a fact that always made him smile. She had dedicated her legal career to prosecuting financial crimes, transforming their family's personal tragedy into a tool for justice, especially when it came to cases like Julian Torres. "Ready for lunch, Dad?" Tom closed his laptop. "Always. How's the Martinez case going?" "Another wannabe Julian Torres," Ava teased playfully. "He thought he could run a real estate scam targeting elderly veterans. Bad choice, that one. The judge was kind enough to grant all of our motions this morning. He's looking at 20 years minimum." They took the elevator to the parking garage, where Tom's new truck waited, still practical, but now top of the line. Some habits die hard, right? "I got a message from Mac this morning," Tom shared as they drove. "They're naming him Chief of Operations at the hospital." "Good. He deserves it." Ava checked her phone. "Izzy's moving up to Deputy Chief next month. Danny's cybersecurity firm just landed another government contract." Their friends had prospered in the years since Eleanor and Rick's misfortune. It was a lesson in the value of loyalty over betrayal. The restaurant was upscale but discreet, one of their regular spots. The maitre d' took them to their usual corner table, where they could keep an eye on all the entrances, a habit they'd held on to. "Sarah's getting married next month," Ava mentioned as they looked over the menus. "She asked me to be her maid of honor." Tom nodded in agreement. Sarah had been Ava's rock during the darkest days, offering shelter and support. Their families had become like one big, happy family. "Mom tried reaching out again," Ava said quietly, her voice tinged with emotion. Tom's hand, which had been holding his water glass, tightened. "When?" "Last week. Email from a new account." Ava's tone was measured. "I wanted to explain her side. Now that she's found peace, or whatever, I blocked her." Tom nodded in agreement. Eleanor had tried several times over the years to reconnect, but each attempt met with silence. She'd moved to Florida after the divorce, remarried a retiree, and tried to rebuild her life. Tom kept tabs on her through various channels, not out of sentiment, but as part of a strategy. Know your enemies, even defeated ones. "Any word on Rick's old colleagues?" Ava asked. "Castellanos are mostly legitimate now. The old man passed away last year. His sons are running clean businesses now." Tom had maintained a carefully neutral relationship with the crime family. Mutual respect, mutual distance. Julian's still in prison. It's hard to know how long he'll be there, but it'll be at least another 10 years. Their meals arrived. Steak for Tom, grilled salmon for Ava. They ate in comfortable silence for a while. Hey, just wanted to let you know that the company's growing again, Tom shared casually. We bought that development firm in Phoenix, the one Rick tried to steal from that widow. Ava's smile, though, carried a playful air of vindictiveness. Nice touch, she added warmly. Tom returned the warm smile. The company's growth had been thoughtful and planned. Every acquisition either strengthened their position or settled old scores. The money he'd taken from Rick was like planting the seeds for a beautiful, successful business. Detective Rodriguez called yesterday, Ava said. Remember that cold case they reopened? Rick's murder. Tom's face revealed no emotions. Oh, officially closed now. They thought it was a mob hit. It's on the inactive list now. Ava met his eyes. There are no new leads. They hadn't talked about Tom's exact role in Rick's death. Ava had never asked, understanding that some questions were better left unvoiced. But she knew her father. She knew what he was capable of. She knew he'd do anything to protect his family. After lunch, they strolled to the park where Ava had played as a child. The old playground had been replaced by new, exciting equipment, all thanks to an anonymous donation from Walker and Associates. James proposed, Ava said, her voice filled with joy. Tom turned to look at his daughter. James Chun was a prosecutor she'd met 2 years ago. Smart, honest, devoted to Ava. Tom had run extensive background checks, of course, and everything checked out. The man was a good person. What did you say? Said I needed time. I need time to trust again, especially after what happened with Mom. James isn't like Rick or Eleanor, Tom said gently, trying to be understanding. He's proven himself. You approve? I'm all for it, as long as it makes you happy and treats you right. Tom's tone softened. And he knows what'll happen if he doesn't. Ava laughed. Yeah, he's terrified of you. In a good way. They watched the children play for a while, the parents nearby, all in the midst of regular, everyday life. Tom sometimes wondered what that was like. Izzy mentioned they found Eleanor's ex-boyfriend, Julian's old storage unit, Ava said. There are so many documents. It could cause problems for some people. We've already taken care of it, Tom replied. Danny scrubbed anything sensitive. As far as anyone knows, it was empty. Danny's cybersecurity division, with its military-grade protocols, had been such a lifesaver over the years. Information was power, and Tom believed in controlling both. His phone buzzed with the thought of Mac sending their monthly security report. It was a practice that had grown out of past experiences. Trust, but verify. It's always best to be cautious. Sarah wants you to walk her down the aisle, Ava mentioned. Her dad's totally cool with sharing the honor. Tom felt a warmth in his chest. Family isn't just about blood. Sometimes, it was the people who stood by you in the darkest moments. They walked back to the office, passing the construction site for their newest project, a women's shelter, being built in partnership with Izzy's domestic violence task force. It was another way of balancing the scales. Dinner tonight? Ava asked as they reached her car. James wants to talk to you, properly. Tom nodded. Tell him to bring that bourbon he's been saving. And remind him that I'm an excellent shot. Ava kissed his cheek. I love you, Dad. Try not to terrorize my boyfriend too much. No promises. As he watched her drive away, Tom thought about the years since Eleanor's betrayal. He'd rebuilt more than a business empire. He'd created a new family, a family that was stronger than blood. He'd created a legacy built on loyalty instead of lies. Back in his office, Tom reviewed the day's reports: construction projects across 3 states, investment portfolios managed by trusted associates, security briefings from Danny's team. It was a well-built machine, every part carefully controlled. Mac's weekly check-in arrived by encrypted email. Eleanor was still in Florida. New husband's health is failing. There was nothing suspicious about it. Julian had been denied parole again. No outside contacts. Castellano's business dealings are clean. The territory is stable. Sadly, Judge Preston passed away in prison. He was just having a really long day. Baglia is still in witness protection, but he's doing well. He's keeping his silence, which is totally understandable. Tom archived the report with 5 years of similar updates. The past never died, but we can manage it. It's all contained, controlled. His phone rang. James Chun, requesting a meeting before dinner. James wanted to do things properly, so he asked permission. It might seem a bit old-fashioned, but Tom really values James's thoughtfulness. "Come by the office," he said to James. "Let's talk." The young prosecutor arrived right on time, looking his best and acting with respect, but not timidity. It was a good sign. "Tom, I'd like to talk about Ava." "Please have a seat," Tom said, gesturing to a chair. "Let's talk about your intentions." 2 hours later, Tom felt a sense of satisfaction. James had proven himself again. Honest about his feelings, clear about his plans, unafraid to stand his ground when challenged. He was definitely a worthy partner for Ava. The engagement ring James showed him was elegant, not flashy. The prenup he proposed was fair. His background was clean, his career trajectory solid. But what really mattered to James was family and loyalty. "I'll never hurt her," James promised, his voice warm and sincere. "I'll always be true to her." "No," Tom agreed, his voice warm and reassuring. "You won't. Because you know what happens to people who hurt my family." James met his eyes steadily. "Yes, sir. I know exactly what happens." Tom smiled warmly. The young man had done his research, and he understood the warnings wrapped up in Rick's unsolved murder, Eleanor's exile, and Julian's downfall. "Good. Welcome to the family, son. Now, about that bourbon." Later that night, Tom stood at his office window, looking out over his city as it sparkled. His empire had been built on the ashes of betrayal, forged in the fires of revenge. But it had become something more, a fortress protecting those he loved, a legacy worthy of his daughter's inheritance. Eleanor and Rick had taught him so much about trust and betrayal. He'd learned them well, and he built his new life on their bitter wisdom. And now, he had everything they tried to steal: money, influence, respect. But more than that, he had the things they'd never understood: loyalty, family, honor. His phone buzzed with an alert from Danny's security team. A routine update, nothing urgent. The world kept spinning, and the threats kept coming, but he managed to keep his cool. But now, he was in control, instead of being controlled. Tom smiled in the darkness, remembering Eleanor's tears, Rick's terror, Julian's pleas for mercy. They thought him weak, predictable, easily destroyed. But they were wrong. But nobody would make that mistake again. His new family, Ava, James, Mac, Izzy, Danny, and even Sarah, understood what truly mattered. Loyalty was the most important thing. Honor among warriors. Protection for those who earned it. And for those who betrayed it, there was destruction. The past was settled, and the future was looking bright. The future was looking bright. And Thomas Walker stood guard over both, unchanged in the ways that mattered. A protector, a warrior, a man who never forgave betrayal and never forgot his enemies. If anyone was ever unsure of this truth, they only had to ask Eleanor. She was rotting away in a prison in Florida. Ask Julian, growing old in prison. Ask Rick. Oh, wait. They couldn't ask Rick anything. Not anymore. Tom's smile widened as he turned from the window. It was time to head home and prepare for dinner with his growing family. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, and new chances to prove that loyalty mattered more than blood. The war was long over, and it was time to move on. He had won it completely. Now, he ruled the peace with the same iron will that had brought him victory, just as it should be. It would always be this way. After all, some things never change. Thomas Walker was dedicated to protecting his family and punishing those who threatened it, and he always would be. This is where our story comes to an end. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this story, I would be delighted if you could subscribe to this channel. You can click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.